If you have been watching the headlines, you have been seeing the layoffs, Meta, Google, Salesforce, Cisco. The names read like who is who of Silicon Valley royalty, and pink slips have been coming in waves since late 2022. So here's a question that nobody in the mainstream real estate media has answered clearly. If tens of thousands of high earning tech workers lost their jobs, the very people propping up the Bay Area home demand, why haven't the prices crashed? So today we are going to do something that most real estate content won't do. We are going to look at the actual data, the layoff numbers, the inventory figures, wage distributions, migration patterns, and answer this question honestly. Because the answer matters enormously. Whether you are a buyer waiting for a crash that may never come, a seller wondering if now is the time to list, or an investor trying to read this market, you need to understand what's actually happening underneath the surface. And at the end of this video, I will tell you what the one trigger actually is, the specific thing that would need to happen for prices to genuinely break. So let's start with the layoff numbers because the context is everything here. What the layoffs represented for the most part was not a collapse, it was a correction, a right sizing. Companies are shredding excess hiring from the pandemic bubble years and returning to something closer to 2019 staffing levels. Now, zoom into Bay Area specifically. Even in the worst of the layoff cycle, the number of Bay Area tech workers who lost jobs represented somewhere between 3 to 6% of that workforce. That is not nothing, but it is also not the mass exodus event that would crater the housing demand. And here is a part that gets overlooked almost entirely. The median tech compensation in the Bay Area actually increased since 2022. The workers who survived the layoffs, who proved they were core to their organizations, were retained at higher levels or moved to competitors in fierce bidding wars. The demand base did not collapse, it just concentrated. The single biggest reason Bay Area home prices have not crashed has almost nothing to do with the demand. It has everything to do with the supply. A balanced housing market is one where neither buyers nor sellers have overwhelming leverage, and it requires roughly 4 to 6 months of supply. That means if no new homes came to market, it would take 4 to 6 months to sell through the existing inventory. The Bay Area has spent most of the past 2 years at 1.5 to 2.5 months of supply for single family homes. That is a severe supply shortage by any historical measure. And when demand drops 20% but supply drops 30%, prices don't fall. They have actually upward pressure. So, why is the supply so constrained? Three reasons. Reason number one, the rate lock in effect. A homeowner who bought or refinanced in 2020 or 21 is sitting on a mortgage rate between 2.5 and 3.5%. If they sell that home and buy a new home today, they are looking at a rate somewhere north of 6.5 to 7%. So on a $1.5 million home, which is barely above median in the Bay Area, that rate difference translates to roughly 2,800 more per month in mortgage payments for the same price of home. Nobody with a 3% mortgage sells voluntarily into a 7% rate environment unless they absolutely have to. So the homeowners who could list are not listing. The supply tap is nearly shut off. Reason number two, Prop 13 clarification. So California's Prop 13 increases it puts a cap at 2% per year. A Bay Area homeowner who bought in 1995 is paying property taxes on an assessed value from nearly 30 years ago, often a fraction of what the home is worth today. So if they sell, they reset to the current market value taxes. That is a powerful financial incentive to never sell. And across the Bay Area, aging homeowner population, it has created a structural lock-in that keeps tens of thousands of potentially movable properties permanently off the market. Reason number three, new construction is not happening. Zoning restrictions, environmental review timelines, construction costs, all of it has kept new housing supply in the Bay Area at a trickle for decades. The region is one of the most constrained housing markets in the country from a permitting standpoint. So, when you combine those three forces, the rate lock in effect, the tax calcification, and construction constraints, you get a supply environment where prices are structurally supported even when the demand weakens. So let's look at who is actually buying in the Bay Area right now because the composition of buyers has shifted significantly and that shift explains a lot. In 2021 and early 2022, a significant portion of Bay Area buyers were stretching young tech workers with RSUs, options, and salaries that were impressive but had not fully compounded. Buyers who needed to win bidding wars and were doing so at the very edge of their financial capacity. So that cohort pulled back in 2022 and 23 as the rates rose. They are priced out. They are renting and they are waiting. But they were replaced not in volume but in financial strength by a different buyer profile. All cash purchases as a percentage of total transactions in the Bay Area increased meaningfully from 2021 to 23. Buyers who don't care about the mortgage rates because they are not getting a mortgage. Downsizers liquidating equity from appreciated homes. Foreign nationals relocating for tech roles. Multi generational wealth transfers where parents help children buy. So these buyers are less rate sensitive. They are also less price sensitive. And in a low volume market, they set the price floor. Simultaneously, and this is crucial, return to office mandates have quietly reversed part of the pandemic migration story. In 2022 and early 2023, a lot of high earners left the Bay Area entirely. They took their remote jobs to Reno, Austin, Denver, Miami. They rented or bought somewhere cheaper and collected their Bay Area salaries from a lower cost of living city. Then the tech giants started requiring in office attendance 3 days a week, 4 days, some going back to five. And those workers or their equivalents at companies with stricter return to office policies, they started trickling back. Not always buying immediately, but entering the rental market, which compressed rental vacancy, which pushed rents back up, which made rent versus buy calculation start moving in buying's favor again. So demand did not evaporate, it shifted, contracted, and reorganized. but it never collapsed. There is a psychological dimension to Bay Area real estate that pure data analysis cannot fully capture as well. And you can't understand this market without acknowledging it. Bay Area homeowners, as a cohort, have been told that they were wrong to buy at almost every point in the market's history. Every cycle has produced confident predictions of a coming collapse. Analysts, economists, journalists, all making the bear case. And almost every point, the long term holder was rewarded, and the person who waited for the crash ended up buying higher or not at all. That history creates a specific buyer and a seller psychology. Sellers don't panic. They have watched their neighbors ride it out through dot com bursts, financial crisis, and global pandemics. Distress selling is rare because most Bay Area homeowners have enough equity and enough conviction to wait. Buyers who are committed to the area have been conditioned to believe that waiting is the more expensive strategy. And that belief, whether it is ultimately correct in the current cycle or not, suppresses the kind of capitulation that produces price crashes. This is not to say psychology can override fundamentals indefinitely. It can't, but it does explain why the market moves slowly and why crashes here tend to look more like 10 to 15% corrections over 18 months rather than the sharp 30 to 40% drops people imagine when they say the word crash. Now, the word that you have been looking for in the title. Yet, everything I have described, the supply constraints, the resilient demand, the psychology, the rate lock in, these are structural forces that have held the market together through a genuinely difficult macro environment. But structural forces are not permanent forces, they bend. Sometimes they break, and there are specific scenarios, not inevitable, but plausible, where the Bay Area housing market could face a genuine correction or a meaningful magnitude. So, here are the four triggers I would be watching. Trigger number one, a second wave of tech layoffs concentrated in senior roles, which to some extent is already happening. While the early layoffs were disproportionately junior, entry level roles, recent hires, roles that were hired speculatively, senior engineers, staff engineers, principal engineers, the high earners actually driving the home purchases largely retained their jobs. So, if an AI driven restructuring or a deeper economic downturn begins eliminating those senior roles at scale, the demand math changes. These are the buyers. If they are gone, the demand floor drops. Trigger number two, rates staying elevated past 2026. The rate lock in effect works as long as the owners with 3% mortgages believe they are eventually going to be able to trade into something reasonable. So, if the market comes to believe that 6 to 7% is a new norm, that those pandemic era rates were the aberration and not the baseline, you will start to see unlocks. Life events, divorce, death, job relocation, retirement will start bringing supply to the market that wouldn't otherwise move. A sustained high rate environment for 3 to 4 or more years starts to erode the lock in effect meaningfully. Trigger number three, a large scale employer departure or a contraction. Bay Area home values are deeply correlated with the employment concentration of a small number of major tech employers: Apple, Google, Meta, Salesforce. These companies' headcount decisions directly shape the local housing market. If one or more of these employers were to execute significant Bay Area workforce reductions while expanding elsewhere, like Austin, Seattle, or even internationally, the local demand base contracts in the ways that were hard to offset. This is not likely in the near term, but it is not impossible. Trigger number four: a state or a local policy shock. Rent control expansion, capital gain changes, significant property tax reform, or new landlord liability laws. Any of those, any of these could push investor owners to liquidate at scale, flooding the market with supply at exactly the wrong moment for prices. California has shown repeatedly that it is capable of passing housing legislation that moves fast and hits hard. None of these triggers are firing right now in combination, and I want to be clear. I'm not predicting a crash. The data does not support a crash call in the near term. What I am saying is that the word yet in the title of this video is doing real work. The forces holding this market up are real and they are also finite. And a sophisticated buyer or seller should understand both sides of that equation. So let's make this practical. If you are a buyer, the crash you are waiting for is probably not coming in the next 12 to 18 months based on the current data. The supply problem alone prevents it. If you are financially ready, rate locked into something manageable, and buying a home you intend to hold for 5 plus years, the opportunity cost of waiting may exceed the potential discount from a correction that you may or may not materialize. That does not mean buying recklessly. It means the calculus of waiting has a real cost that most people don't factor in: rising rents, missed equity accumulation, the psychological weight of indefinite delay. So buy smart, buy in a micro market with fundamentals, good schools, bar taxes, job corridor proximity, buy below your ceiling, and model your numbers at 7% rate, not the rate you hope to refinance into someday. If you are a seller, the window is not wide open, but it is open. Inventory remains constrained, demand from qualified buyers persists, and motivated sellers with well presented properties in good locations are still transacting, often with multiple offers in the best corridors. So, price correctly from day one. The days of testing the market at a fantasy number and reducing your way to a deal are costing sellers tens of thousands of dollars. So, come in sharp, generate urgency, and let the market compete. Sellers who are struggling right now are the ones who priced for 2022. Don't make that mistake. The Bay Area housing market is one of the most analyzed, most predicted, and most consistently surprising markets in the country. It has humbled bears and bulls alike for 5 decades. What we know right now, the fundamentals that have held prices up: constrained supply, concentrated high income demand, structural psychological factors remain intact. The triggers that could break them exist, but are not currently motion in combination. That is the honest answer to the question in the title. Not prices will never fall, not crash is coming, just not yet. And here is why, and here is what to watch. So, if you found this breakdown useful, there is a follow up video already on the channel where we go zip code by zip code through the Bay Area and identify which specific neighborhoods show the most vulnerability to a correction and which ones have the strongest structural support. That link I'll be posting in the description in few weeks. So subscribe if you want analysis like this every week. We don't want to hype. We don't do predictions dressed up as certainty, just data and context and strategy. So see you in the next one. Thank you.